Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. We are thrilled to have back with us former senator, former phenomenal prosecutor, Doug Jones from Alabama. Welcome.
Thanks, Jen. It's always great to be with you.
Well, I cry for our Justice Department, which the justice part of it used to mean something. How is it that we've gotten to a state of affairs where the Justice Department files just a junk complaint against a federal court judge, where lawyers go into court and don't even have the facts or misrepresent the facts and the law, that we have a Justice Department that now apparently does the president's bidding to go investigate his political enemies? How did we get here?
Well, Jen, it's very simple. Unfortunately, we got here through an election. And that is a sad state of affairs, that democracy is supposed to be the guardrail for things like this. And in this case, that guardrail completely broke the moment that Donald Trump was certified as the winner of the election, much less sworn in, because he has installed, and I put the Senate Republicans somewhat complicit in this, because
Absolutely.
they have confirmed all of the, not all, because not all of them are need confirming, but the top echelon of the Justice Department right now are more than just Trump loyalists. They were Trump lawyers. Pam Bondi represented Donald Trump in the first impeachment trial, in which I was in the Senate at the time. Todd Blanche, Bove, all of those folks were personal lawyers. And it seems to me, and I think it seems to most people now, that they see their role not as enforcing the law without fear or favor, but being the president's lawyer, continuing to be the president's lawyer. We only saw that most recently when Todd Blanche visited, he's the deputy attorney general. He's the number two. He visited Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. He didn't have the prosecutors that knew the case with him. He did it on his own. In fact, he fired one of the prosecutors that had done that case, Miss Comey's, James Comey's daughter. So, that's how we've got there. And the second part of that is that we have lawyers in place that do not see the Justice Department as anything in their job. I assume that getting that job was so important to them, it meant more to them than upholding the Constitution and the law. And they felt like they were just being hired by Donald Trump. And that's where we are. And it is sad. I told somebody the other day, we may as well take the word justice off of the building and leave it blank, or put, Department of Presidential Whims and Retribution or something. I don't know. But it's for those of us who have been, and my first stint with the Justice Department was a long time ago as an assistant U.S. attorney. 1980 is when I started. And I've had this just affection for the department, no matter who was in charge, no matter which president, no matter which attorney general. I didn't always agree, but you always felt a sense of security that the department would carry out its mission. You do not feel that sense of security anymore. Not at all. It is just the opposite.
And you hear from former prosecutors, former judges who really never speak out, that they do see this crumbling before their eyes. It used to be that if you were in the Justice Department, it should be true of every lawyer, but particularly for the Justice Department, and you go into federal court, you live in fear that you have made a mistake, that you have misrepresented something to the judge. I don't want to be embarrassed. You want to check all the facts 3 times. You want to check your citations, because there's nothing worse than going into court and misrepresenting something to the federal bench, because your reputation, your future ability to litigate is at issue. They seem not to care anymore.
No.
Do they just think that the Supreme Court is going to bail them out no matter what in the end, and they don't really care what judges think of them?
One would think that seems to be where they're heading. Every case that, and let me say this, Jen, real quick before I get to that. I do think there's still within the ranks of U.S. attorneys' offices across this country, AUSAs who are still assistant U.S. attorneys who are still going into court every day, and they're doing the right thing. They're prosecuting the cases that need to be prosecuted. They're doing it in the way that one would expect them to do it. You've got agents that are still out there, whether it's a drug case or a gun case, or whether it is a white collar case. There's so much of that going on day to day, and people don't always see it. They might get a glimpse of it if they've still got local media. A lot of people don't these days. But it's being overshadowed by those at the top that are clearly not following that every time it seems that they go into court, they are not playing to anything other than the ultimately to a Supreme Court that they believe will rule their way. And again, judges are doing what they can to call that out. Now we see the department trying to file ethics complaints against a judge who has continually done nothing more than took them to task for the very things that you're talking about, for not
Right.
following his orders, for misrepresenting the law. And these are not, by the way, it often happens where you unintentionally that you make a mistake. These are not mistakes.
No.
These are intentionally going in there to mislead, misrepresent, and so we're seeing now that the department is trying to bully the judges the same way that they tried to bully law firms and the media and everybody else. And ultimately, they believe that at least 5 justices on the Supreme Court, and more than likely 6, will bail them out.
You know, it is greatly disturbing in the Boasberg complaint, which you just referenced. The Chief Justice was in the room and, in fact, was conducting this conversation. What is the role of the Chief Justice in backing up his lower court judges? And I say his because he sits atop that branch of government. They don't report to him; they're not his employees, but he is the most senior person for that branch of government. What is his responsibility? What would you like him to say or do to try to confer some protection and some sense of that he's got the backs of lower court judges? Instead, he's done the opposite with these constant emergency petitions, which overturn or suspend the work of lower court judges. What would he be doing?
Justice Roberts has spoken out a couple of times. He did during the first Trump administration when
Right.
The president attacked particularly the Hispanic judge out in California. He has spoken out at least once already. Quite frankly, I think he needs to use his bully pulpit off the bench to maybe do that a little bit more. He is often asked to speak, to give
Yes.
his and the justices are getting out a little bit more. You saw Justice Barrett recently doing something. Justice Jackson has even appeared in a cameo appearance on Broadway. And so I think it would be nice to see the Justice Roberts speak out more, to essentially, because when he speaks, he's essentially giving not just his view, but somewhat of a warning. You can only
Yes.
push the judiciary so far. And quite
Right.
frankly, Jen, one would think that if they continue this road of attacking the judiciary, that all of this, our federal judiciary, will come to their defense and start doing some things. On the other hand, I do believe that one of the biggest problems that the court has right now is the extraordinary use of that shadow docket. The so-called emergency docket, which is now no longer an emergency. It is just simply a way for this administration to overrule decisions that they don't like. I was reading a statistic the other day that I think that President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama in their 16 years used that emergency docket request only about 16 times. They used it like 40 in their first term and over 20 in the first 6 months of this term.
Yes.
And they've won like 18 of those. And that really damages the credibility of the court. in part because the court doesn't give an opinion. They don't give
Yes.
their reasoning. They just simply make a ruling. And the American public is left to just wonder what the hell is going on.
Right.
And it gives the appearance that the court has become political. And maybe they haven't. Maybe they truly believe that they're doing the right things as opposed to political. One would naively think that, but they need to say that. They need to give their reasoning. If they've got to do legal gymnastics to get that, the American public needs to see it. If it's solid, then it's solid. And we just, those that might disagree with them, go on. But I think if the court, and that's the one thing that I do believe that the Chief Justice could do, and that is to limit the use of that emergency docket. They've already limited, the use of nationwide jurisdictions. Fine. If you're going to do that, then cut down the damn emergency docket a little bit and give people some more confidence that the court's doing their job in a fair and equitable manner.
Absolutely. One aspect of the Justice Department that is really being hollowed out or kind of contorted is, of course, anything having to do with voting rights and civil rights. They seem to be dropping a number of these consent decrees that they've had with police departments, for example. They have really not pursued a civil rights agenda in the way that really administrations of both parties have in the past. What's your view about what's going on and what the mission there is, and whether there is still a commitment to civil rights, which was, as you know, the reason for beginning the Justice Department was in the post-Civil War and in the enforcement of civil rights?
Yeah, Jen, I think that there's still a commitment to civil rights. The problem is it's not a commitment to the communities that need the protection of their civil rights. They are committed to protecting the civil rights of the privileged, the rich and powerful, but they are not committed to protect the civil rights of the African American community, the Hispanic community, any other immigrant community. Even poor people, they're not committed to respecting those rights and doing that. We see that time and time again with the dismantling of the Civil Rights Division, the way that they're attacking election integrity these days under the guise of combating fraud. It's all a ruse, and they are only protecting the rights of the wealthy. And it's not just the most obvious ones like in the Civil Rights Division. They're not enforcing, the public corruption unit is essentially gone. So they're not really going to go after corrupt politicians, which gives a blank check to so many. They've essentially defanged the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, not doing that, allowing foreign, business leaders across the country to go into these foreign countries and do whatever it takes to gain an advantage, whether it is corrupting that system or not. So it's any manner of things where if you are someone that is supporting Donald Trump and his family, your civil rights are being not only protected, they're being expanded. You can basically are getting a blank check to do whatever you want to. And we see that in the pardon process. Okay, the pardon of January 6th, the pardon of all these other folks. As long as you're a buddy, your civil rights are not only going to be expanded, they're going to be given back to you. If you had done something illegal and incarcerated, they're going to give them back to you with a pardon. And it is stunning what I think folks are seeing, but we don't see a lot of profiles and courage in Congress to stand up and question.
Yes.
And that's a problem.
The Senate has been completely supine, and that cannot be. You can't have a non-functioning Article 1. I want to end on a topic that has a lot of manifestations, and that is really, he has attacked federalism, which is very peculiar because Republicans used to be all about federalism, the laboratories of democracy allowing autonomy. But you've seen them try to sue the state of Illinois for saying, no, we don't want our law enforcement people spending time running errands for the ICE agents. We want them doing other things. They deployed, of course, the National Guard. They nationalized the Guard over the objections of the governor and sent the Marines into California. They're now sending out these preposterous requests to essentially blue states, demanding the entire voter file, which they have no right to get, and includes all kinds of confidential information. This does seem to be an effort to eliminate a institutional level of resistance to an authoritarian, and that is the states. What's your impression of what they're doing? And we have had a very robust response from attorneys general that maybe people haven't recognized. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, look, Republicans have been famous, I think, over the years for proclaiming that they love states' rights until they don't. Yeah. They love states' rights on abortion until the Supreme Court overrules, and now they want a nationwide abortion ban. They'd love to do it until they do something a little bit different. And the Trump administration has now taken the idea of federal control to a new level. They are pushing, but they're primarily pushing in states that they don't like. They don't have to come to some states. They're already doing the things that they want. So they want to make sure they ensure that with others. And I do think what we're seeing and what we're going to continue to see is a strengthening state governments and the role of the governors, the role of the attorneys general, which quite frankly, I think can give a lot of hope for a lot of things. I think people are going to push back on that, and they're going to want their state to maintain a level of that federalism that was ensured by the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. Yes. And that's pushing back on that authoritarianism that we see from the government. We've got some very, very good Democratic governors and some very, very good Democratic attorneys general who are very smart, and they're banding together, and hopefully they will be able to do things not only on the state level, but together, and then join their other states, so that when it does reach the Supreme Court will likewise say, okay, there is this 10th Amendment, there is this thing that we've got to do. We do have a system of federalism, and yes, this is a state prerogative. You cannot force the state to do this. Interestingly, they tell the states now that immigration is something that we're got to do, but yet they want to push them to do whatever they want to do. They don't give them the leeway. It is just whose ox is being gored with these guys, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no consistency. It is just whatever they believe is in their interest to maintain power.
Very last question. You've been so generous with your time. Roy Cooper, another Democrat from a southern red state. What do you know about Roy Cooper? What's been your experience with him? What do you think of him?
Look, I know Roy. I campaigned with him some when we were trying to get a Senate candidate elected a couple of years ago. I was up there doing the presidential race a couple of times. I am a big fan of Roy Cooper. I think he is one of the consummate public servants. And I say that in the finest sense of the word. He is not just a politician who has started and worked his way up. He is a public servant. He's got that public servant's heart. I think he's not just going to be an outstanding candidate. He is going to be an outstanding senator. And I know that state's going to cost a lot of money. I know they put it in play. They do all this. Everybody says, don't count your chickens. I get all that. But I'm telling you, you can put that one in the Democrats' column. And the reason is because he is such a great public servant. And the people of North Carolina know that.
Well, you give me hope, because if you say it, it's got to be true. Thank you so much, Doug. From Alabama, you should know what it's like running in a red state, and you do. So thank you so much. We'll look forward to having you back. It's always terrific to talk to you. Take care.
Thanks, Jen. Take care.